Hi, my name is Tiffani Bova. I am the Global Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce and also the author of the book Growth IQ. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be with you here today at Leadership Goes Beyond. It's a wonderful session where all of the proceeds are going to be going to at-risk and disadvantaged children charities. So there was no question. As soon as I got asked to show up, I was like, what time and what day? So I couldn't be more thrilled to be with you here today. So I'm going to go through a presentation, sort of set the stage of what I think is going on today in our current environment, as well what I think the future may hold for us as we look out to 2021 and 2022. I know so much is going on right now, we almost can't see the forest through the trees, but there's lots of things we can be doing to prepare ourselves for what's coming next. So let me start by first saying thank you. Thank you to all of you for attending today. Thank you for your continued support for me over the course of my career, but also just a hello, depending on where you're joining us in the world. Thank you for joining us today. So with that, let's get started. This is about sort of the great reset. What are the things you can do today to set yourself up for success tomorrow? But let me start from the beginning. I'm going to set the scene. The scene is one we all know, but I want to frame it a little bit differently. This could be the worst disaster NASA has ever experienced, came from a NASA director during Apollo 13. But the response was one I think we all can embrace today, which is, with all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour. So how we learn from the situation we're in right now, in all that's going on, we have this global crisis that is just unprecedented across public health, across economics, and of course, across business. And this is not just a regional issue. This is not just a vertical or industry issue or a United States issue or a European issue or an Asian issue. It is absolutely every region in the world is facing the same thing at different time, at different pace, at different speed. But at the end of the day, we're all feeling this together. And that, I think, is the first time, at least in my lifetime, where I've felt that everybody is in the same situation and trying to find our way through. And so from a growth perspective, this is the April numbers. The June numbers have just come out, and they're marginally different, very similar. But you can see the global economy is slowing down. Advanced economies have really been hit. But what we see coming out in 2021, once again, looking to next year, we see that we can get ourselves back on track, especially if we're staying in the direction that we are right now. If we can get the health crisis a little more managed and a little more stable and get that curve to flatten, then we have the ability to get people back to the office. Because if you're like me, I'm working harder from home than I was working when I was traveling on the road, that's for sure. So I don't really like getting back to work because I don't know about you, I've continued working this entire time. So thinking about how are we going to get ourselves out of this, that's what's most important. And that's what I hope you get out of our time today. Now, this is different by region. I wanted to show this because, look, many companies have global footprints, even if they're located in one region or another. And so I wanted to show you just across globally where we think there is opportunities. And many countries are optimistic, but others are not. And so we have to find a way that if you are selling into regions that are less optimistic, finding it more difficult to navigate through this current situation, then you may want to rethink where it is you're going to double down for growth, both this year and going forward in 21 and 2022. So it's not even. The growth in countries wasn't even before this pandemic, and it's lumpy on its way out, meaning we just don't know which direction it's going to go as we come in and out of lockdowns in some parts of the world, depending on when you watch this presentation. The United States, I'm in Southern California. We've gone back on some sort of a portion of our lockdown. Melbourne is on a full lockdown for 6 weeks. New Zealand has shut itself down again. There is all kinds of things happening around the world. And even the EU saying that until the US gets the curve a lot more flat, that they don't want Americans coming into the region. And all of this has impact on the optimism of businesses getting back to growth, no question. Now, by industry, you have a similar situation. So if you are a company who sells into certain industries, you may be more protected than those that are in, let's say, hospitality. But if you're in software and telecom and technology, if you're in banking and insurance, if you're in capital equipment in many cases, or supply chain, there's many opportunities for you to add so much value at this time that you may find yourself in a much better situation than those that are focused on industries or regions where they're more hard hit. So we are definitely in what I called in my book a global growth stall. Now, there were examples in the book where the growth stalls were either by region, or they were by size, small business, medium, they were by industry, or it was just companies in a growth stall in and of itself. There's a statistic out that says 85% of businesses at some point in their history will face a growth stall, meaning they've slowed down on their growth. It's been quarter over quarter decline in top line growth, or they've become flat in their growth. Now, they may have made it into negative growth territory. So growth stall does not just mean negative. It means that if you look back a year and you go quarter over quarter or year over year, that you see the trend of a decline in your top line growth. And so this pulse survey is from PwC, and you can see that the revenue and profits are decreasing 25%, or 10 to 25, or less than 10, decrease, but the range is unknown. And you can see 20% are saying increase, no change, or difficult to assess. So I hope in that 20%, more of it is increase or no change than difficult to assess, because if you're a business owner and you don't know whether you're in a growth stall, that's an entirely different situation or different challenge. So ultimately, I wanted to show you that not everybody is feeling complete catastrophic decline in revenue, that we have different variations of that across the spectrum. Now, what was the catalyst? I mean, at the end of the day, I don't necessarily have to tell this audience what the catalyst was, but indulge me for a moment. I believe that this pandemic was a black swan event. It's very interesting. I was listening to the author of that book, The Black Swan, and he doesn't think that this was a black swan event, because one of his criteria for that is that it was unexpected. We weren't expecting it to happen. So something like a tsunami that we did not know it was going to happen. We know they're going to happen. We just don't know when. This particular situation, he claims that the World Health Organization and others were warning us of a global pandemic could show itself in the next decade or so. And so here we are. But I would say that it is such a unusual combination of all things happening simultaneously that I explained at the beginning, right? This is about business. This is about health. This is about infrastructure. This is about all kinds of things, our own personal lives, school, education, healthcare, everything has been impacted. So what this showed the markets and what it showed many people was that we had not made the right investments leading up to this black swan event. We weren't prepared to have everybody work from home or educate from home or get healthcare from home. Our supply chains have clearly shown strain, especially when it comes to things like food distribution. I saw something last week where we actually put into a landfill over 3 million pounds of potatoes. And to me, that is just obscene for so many reasons. But it was because the supply chain could not get the potatoes from the farm to stores or to restaurants because the restaurants were closed. The supply chain had broken down. And so those are things that were really, highlighted during this time. But what else it's done is it's brought this new sense of urgency around how do we get to this new future? How do we get to the next future? How do we start to make those investments? Whether you're working from anywhere, right? And so this work from anywhere moniker has really started to land and make sense to people, that this is not just about working from home. It's not about working from the office. It might be working from anywhere. And that could be a combination of all kinds of things, whether it's flex hours, flex weeks, whether it's shifts that come in and out at different times, whether some teams work on certain days and other teams work on other days in the office, whatever the end result might be. I totally believe that it's going to look different than it looked before. Now, where will that land? Maybe history can teach us something. So let me just share a couple small business trends that happened during the Great Recession as well, when we had a economic crunch before that in sort of 1998. You can see that small businesses were failing, but the births of new businesses were increasing. During the Great Recession, we had new businesses declining, of opening up, and startups starting, and then the decline of companies far exceeding that. And so now we had seen just up to 2015 that new businesses, that was, it's always the way that it happens, right? Small business startup, they're the engine of communities around the world. And that's the heartbeat. 90% of businesses, if not 95, I'm not sure exactly what the statistics is, are small businesses. And so it is that many are failing, but many new ones are opening every single day, even today, trying to solve problems either in their community or things that they've learned during this time. And that's where I think we have really great opportunity. Now I'm going to go back to, what does history teach us? Revenue is what the engine is to make investments in your business. And so I always get asked the question, should I pull back on my investments today? Should I hire new people? Should I just cut costs as thin as I can and ride this out until it's time to come back out the other side? And I tell you that if you can find ways, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, to continue to have some revenue coming in, take that opportunity, whether it's government loans, whether it's loans from banks in general, to make the investments to get yourself prepared for when businesses and life gets back to a little bit more semblance of normalcy. And what I mean by that is retail establishments are open, kids are back in school, and we've got some sense of the economy humming along again. But ultimately, not everybody was hit from a revenue perspective. And so there is money to be invested. You just have to make the hard choices on where you're going to make those investments. So now, what are these post-COVID habits of consumers? And so I started thinking about this about 2 months ago, was how long does it take for a habit to change for a consumer? And depending on whose research you look at, it can be anywhere from 60 days to 120 days. And depending on where you are in the world, we are far past that amount of time. So now new habits have been formed. Just going to use grocery shopping as an example. You can get in your car and drive to the grocery store, but when the grocery store was closed or the lines were really long or it was limited hours, in the United States, many people went to ordering groceries online. Whether it be a Walmart or an Amazon or a Target or Ralph's or whatever your grocery store is in the US. And so now the question is, when things open back up, will they go back to the grocery store again, or will they continue to take either all or some portion of their grocery via delivery service? And so you can think about that as a habit. And we have to acknowledge the fact that habits have changed. Even something like this. You might not have been so willing to sit through a webinar on a computer screen for a couple of hours on a day. You'd rather get on an airplane or get in your car and drive and see it in person. But now we've been forced into this more video and virtual environment. And so will you be okay with continuing to do that at some point? Not for everything, but for some things, I'm going to say probably yes. Some of these habits will maintain themselves. And so that's why I think that we will land somewhere in between of where we were, where we are now, and where I know we can, from a future perspective, get to, as we start to think about autonomous vehicles or robots, machine learning. I mean, let's just go back to supply chain for a moment. Imagine how terrible of a situation we would have been in had many of the warehouses around the globe not had robots. If humans had to do all the work when we were in the midst of the first 30 days of the pandemic and everything shut down, and we had no ability to do anything from a human perspective without putting many people at risk, many of those robots and the automation that people fought saying it's replacing jobs saved us in many ways. So this is this and conversation. This is technology and human. This is not technology replacing or there's no need for human. This is a example of where we can take both of those things so that 1 + 1 = 3 in this situation. So businesses are adapting. Businesses are adapting every single day. And a lot of this is being driven by, how do we keep our business afloat? Does it mean we have to pivot a little bit, offer something we didn't offer pre-pandemic? That's part of it. Is it we might put a few employees on furlough so we can save a little bit of money, make the investment so we can bring them back? That could be some of it. Is it we're going to eliminate some of our our non-profitable businesses or no longer profitable businesses, eliminate them and double down where we are able to make more profit? That could be that. Another is managing this newly remote workforce. How do you do that? How do you keep people connected and engaged and feel like they're part of something bigger when everyone is dispersed? You have to find a way to make sure that you keep your people engaged. You make sure they're safe, that their mental health is good. This is a really stressful time for so many. If they're working from home, educating their kids from home, and trying to do all of it at the same time, it's really difficult. And burnout is a real thing. So make sure that you're paying attention to your employees, and anything that they may raise, give them the resources, even if it's free resources, phone numbers, do internal calls and webinars, get your people together and let them share their feelings, and then open up about some things that they may need help on. And if they ask, you've got to find a way to try to help them in any way that you can. So it's not just about making sure they have a laptop and a VPN and internet access so that they can keep working. It's also that we make sure that our people are safe, healthy, and happy. The next is revenue stability, right? These are the three big things I can't stress enough that everybody's asking me about. And revenue stability is a little more difficult, right? But if you've done the things on keeping the business afloat, maybe furloughing, removing some of the things that are no longer profitable, doubling down where they are profitable, pulling back maybe on some marketing, doing some things with your sales teams and your channel partners, doing things with your vendors, finding ways to get that revenue stability so that you can have some normalcy in making decisions around the investments that you need to be making to keep your business up and running during this time. So we did some work at Salesforce. This comes out of our Office of Innovation. And I really liked this framework because it allows me and others to have a conversation in three very specific categories. One is stabilize. And let me talk about that for a second. You know, this was my goodness, everything is shutting down. This was really sort of aimed at that first 30 days where everyone was going, what is happening? Maybe even 60. But what we've learned now is we're going in and out of stabilize in some cities and states in the US and some countries outside of the US, where we've opened back up and shut back down again. And so it's kind of going in and out of stabilizing. Like you may have just brought people back to work and now you have to shut down again. So now you need to stabilize everything again. And so stabilize is a category of efforts. And what I want to be clear here is I want you to try to find a person, depending on how big you are, a person, at least one, who's fully focused on this topic. How do we stabilize our people, our business, our employees, our vendors, our cleaning crew, our, all of our suppliers, everything we're doing if we open and if we shut back down? Like, who's responsible for that communication? Who's the point person when people have questions? You have to have somebody responsible for that. It cannot be the same person who's then focused on getting people back to the office or back to some kind of normal work hour schedule. And what I mean by that is it could be, right now it's like, look, we're going to have our call centers. We're going to change our hours. We're going to get people back to work. Getting back to work, getting them back to the office right now is all about safety. You can't just flip the switch, show up, unlock the door, let everyone in. Have you moved the desks around? Are they 6 feet apart? What's the cleaning protocol? What happens if someone comes to your office and visits you? What is your requirements for them to come into your establishment? What if your employees are going into your customers' establishments? What's the rules of engagement between those two? Think about, an NDA. It's kind of like a handshake of, look, my people are going to show up to your office with a mask. They've all tested negative. We expect you to protect our people. That back to work is not just about getting people back to your office. It's about getting your people back to their job, which may require them to see people who do not work for you. And you have to make sure everybody's safe, right? And so I can only speak about us, but for me to be able to go and see a customer or get on an airplane, I have to do a series of almost 10 or 12 things that have to be done before I can even say, hey, Salesforce, will you let me go and do this right now? And the customer, whoever I want to go visit, has to answer as well. And then we make a decision for the safety and security of our people. So that's that topic. And you need to have somebody else, not the same person who's on Stabilize, fully focused on that topic. We actually developed an entire product around getting people back to work called work.com to help scheduling in people, contact tracing, tracking who has been tested and not tested, where people are, where they tested, traveled last, all of that. And we are actually, a number of states in the United States are actually using it as the application to contact trace from a city and county and statewide level, but also to get government workers back to work. The third is kind of growth, right? And once again, a person responsible for the actions of what are we going to do to start to get the engine revving again as it relates to our growth efforts, ad spend, social media marketing, account-based marketing, sales development reps, business development reps, outside sales, inside sales, launching new products, whatever it might be that is in your growth playbook, you have somebody who's responsible for that. Now, if you think about that, that should have completely different work streams, right? Tracking who's doing what is expected. You have an entire playbook so everybody knows. Go back to communicating to your employees. Make sure they understand what you're doing in each of these categories, what it means for them. Remember, this is about keeping your employees safe, but also making sure they know what you're doing to keep the business operating at top performance, getting yourself kind of back to where you were, but more importantly, sort of ahead of that, if you will. So I want to show this as just a shining light, right? The beacon of hope at the end of this beginning part of my presentation. These were 10 successful startups founded during the Great Recession in 2007, 8, 9, and 10. And as you can see, most of these people are keeping us, most of these companies are keeping us up and running during this time. You could say Uber Eats, WhatsApp from a communication, Instagram, what's happening, Pinterest, I want to redesign my house, right? Groupon, I'm looking for a deal, Dropbox, I'm trying to collaborate and share. There are so many things here. And so you have to think, what is the job to be done that you've uncovered during this time where there's a gap in the market? And maybe how could you fill it? And that's what these startup and founders did the last time. So now that's 10 of probably 10,000 that took a shot at it. But the point is that during times like this is where amazing innovation happens, right? Innovation is the mother of necessity. So ultimately, you have to make sure that if you see an opportunity, can you solve it? Can you partner to solve it? What are the things you can do in order to make sure that you set yourself up for success? And it may be completely starting a new business where you see a need in the marketplace. Who knows what the answer is? But clearly, if you put your mind to it and there's a great need, you have the opportunity to have a huge successful business going forward. So now how do you navigate? How do you navigate this growth dilemma? I have a global pandemic. It's very tough to communicate and contact and engage with customers. I don't have my teams in the field. My doors aren't open. I'm a retailer. It's hard for me to service something when I can't get to someone's business. Whatever the case might be, it is a dilemma, but it's all about trying to get yourself back to growth. So I like to show this slide because when I first saw it, I wish that I had seen it when I was writing the book because I would have used this graphic in the book. I started the entire conversation with where should you look for growth is what's the context of your market? And what I mean by that is who are your customers? What are your products? What's your price point? What do your customers say about you? What is your supply chain? What's your customer experience levels? What are your current growth rates? What's your value proposition? All of those questions is unique to you. Too many businesses focus on their competition and try to replicate what they're doing. And in reality, you're not them. You don't have their employees. You don't have their culture. You don't have their customers. You might have a similar product, but unless you're making a highly commoditized product, it's probably not the same product. If it's a nail, okay, a nail is a nail is a nail. But if you're going to say, look, we're going to use this particular material for it, it's sustainable, it's good for the environment, it's more sturdy, it doesn't rust, whatever it is. Okay, you've got differentiation. That's your value prop. So why would you go copy somebody who didn't have that value proposition? So focus on your context, and it's totally situational. And in this, right, somebody's standing on a little deserted island going, oh my gosh, boat, I'm so glad I'm saved. And the guy on the boat is going, oh my gosh, land, I'm saved. But neither one of them are saved. They now have company, but they're not saved. And so the context is, what is your perspective? What is your view? What are the things that you have that others don't have? That's your competitive differentiation. And so I laid out sort of 10 growth paths in my book. On these are the 10 ways I have found over the course of my 25-year career on the ways businesses have actually grown. Now, you may look at this and go, well, of course, there's nothing new here. And that is music to my ears. what I did was I looked at the growth levers and the ways businesses have always grown over time. And I said, let me put a modern spin on it. Let me add to the 1950s Ansoff matrix of sell more of what you have to your existing customers, sell more of what you have to new customers, sell something new to existing customers, sell something new to new customers. It was a little quadrant called the Ansoff matrix. It was developed in the 60s. And I said, I think it's still very relevant, but I'm going to put the modern lens on it of social, mobile, cloud, big data, AR, VR, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all the things we now have, social media, cell phones, 5G, everything we now have at our disposal, and say, does it change those strategies? And so it does, ever so slightly. And so I renamed them, a few of them, and then came up with other ones to sort of capture what I thought the spirit of those growth paths were. But I'm going to get into what are the ones I think are most relevant today during this time that we're in. The first one is customer experience. I started talking about customer experience 8 or 9 years ago, being the new battleground when I was working at Gartner. And I can tell you that we made a comment, my group, we came up with the prediction that the chief marketing officer would spend more on technology than the chief information officer by 2017. And it was like blasphemy. And we made it in like 2013, I think, ish. And everyone thought we were crazy. But lo and behold, marketing started spending more money on technology. And it wasn't just like digital advertising or search engine optimization. They were standing up entire development groups. They were doing reference architects. They had design thinking. They were creating apps. They were even buying hardware. Sometimes they were buying routers and switches and servers and storage and everything they needed to put on-prem to have a development environment and have the ability to do what they needed to do. So they were spending a tremendous amount of money, but it was all focused on this, on customer experience, because you can see in the stats that we as consumers have told the market in both B2B and B2C that we'll pay more for a better experience. Think Four Seasons. Or sitting in first class, you're willing to spend more. 82% of business buyers want the same experience that they get in their consumer lives. Now I'm going to go back to what I said a few minutes ago about habits changing. The consumer habits have forever changed. We're 5 or 6 months into being locked down, almost everything happening virtually. So now we know what the consumer experience is. Now we're going to integrate ourselves back into our business life. And we're going to say, why is it so hard to do it in our business life when it was so easy to get in my consumer life when I was working at home? And so you have to think about these experiences you're having today as a consumer, and what will it teach you? What will it guide you towards? What will it uncover for you to do for your business clients going forward? And then 4 to 8%, those companies that focus on customer experience actually have are 4 to 8% growing faster than other brands that are not. So there is a huge opportunity here, but one that I find the most challenging for companies that are technology-led or product-led is being customer-led. And 68% are emphasizing customer experience over products, that's really where competition happens. Because you might be a reseller for a certain brand. Well, there's 10,000 other resellers who sell the same brand of something. It could be technology. It could be, some kind of salad dressing. It doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, do I have a better experience? Then I'm more willing to choose that brand over another brand, even if the product is it's good. It's not maybe as good as the other one, but the experience is so much better. I'm willing to do it. So customer experience is an area that now, thankfully, everybody is talking about, and it's nothing new. But I wanted you to hear and see why it's important. This is not just the soft stuff. This is not just, what you could be talking about. This is about starting with what your customers want from you, how they want to engage with you, and more importantly, how they feel when they engage with your people, gets them to either buy more frequently, reference you, be your advocate out in the marketplace, forgive you when things go wrong. There's all kinds of things that happen from a loyalty perspective. And if you're in a recurring revenue business, churn declines. You have a much better opportunity to reduce the churn percentage when you focus in on customer experience. The second one is optimize sales. Now you may say, what does that mean? And I'll give you 2 stats that really frame this comment. when I was in my last life, I would always hear, we're in a growth stall in this quarter. What can we do? And I would hear these three levers. One, spend more marketing money. Two, hire more salespeople. Three, cut costs. So I'm going to focus in on hire more salespeople and spend more marketing money, because today, 65% of a salesperson's time is spent on non-selling activities. And 54% of your sellers on day one of any month, year, quarter, whatever it might be, will miss quota. So half your sellers are going to miss quota, and 60% of their time is spent on non-selling activities. I'm just make an assumption here, big guess, that if we could reduce the amount of time they spent on non-selling, the amount of quota they would be able to obtain will go up. Now, it's never going to be possible for all your sellers to hit 100% of quota. So that's not the goal. The goal is to take those sellers that are selling in the 70 or 80% range and move them up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% of quota attainment. The larger your sales team, the greater impact that has. If you have 2 sellers, then you really need to make sure that they're both getting as close as they can to hitting quota. But maybe in that situation, I tell you, you probably need to hire a 3rd seller, because they're only going to, if you were to say the average, if you take everybody in a selling organization, it might be in the high 70% range, because you have some in the high 60s, low 70s, you have some above 100, so if you're in the high 70s, low 80s, like that's a great place to be. But if you're really trying to increase your top line revenue, you've got to make sure that you're bringing in new prospective buyers, but you also have the ability to spin up another seller who can be very effective. But I would not do that until you knew that you had done everything you could to remove all the time they're spending on non-selling, and that you understood what it was and how can you automate it, use technology to shore that up. And then what are the things you can do to help your sellers actually attain their quota or make the increases into their current quota achievement. The third one is customer base penetration. And this is one that I really liked when I wrote the book, and I like it more now, because everybody is so focused on net new logo acquisition. I'm focused on prospects. What about my funnel? What about my pipeline? What about my search engine optimization? Where should I be advertising? Should I be on, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn? Where should I be looking for new business? My answer to you would be, first and foremost, start with the goals you already have. You spent a lot of time, energy, and effort in going and getting the customers you've already acquired. And when you look at the stats, 6 to 7 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than sell into the base. 60 to 70% probability of selling to an existing customer, versus when you go to a net new customer, the close rates, how difficult it is. Of the 100 leads you've gotten, how many end up closing? I guarantee you your close rate is much lower than that 60 to 70%. And then 5 times loyal customers to give you repurchase and forgive you. So what that means is that your existing customers are 5 times more likely to be loyal and to repurchase another of what they've already purchased from you, or a net new product you've launched, and they're willing to forgive you if something goes wrong. Maybe you had an outage, maybe the product broke, maybe in the supply chain you couldn't get them a replacement fast enough. But at the end of the day, if you're very focused on customer experience, you have great communication with your customer, they will hang on for you. Unless you just can't serve them at all anymore. And then 67% repeat customers spend more. So, at the end of the day, your existing base is far more attractive at this time, when going out and finding net new customers is more difficult. So, I didn't mention on the optimized sales slide, but I went out to the market and asked, what are your top challenges from a selling perspective? And one of them was, reaching out to customers at this time. They're not being responsive. My deals are all stalling. My answer to that comment would be, let your customers set the tone. Let them set the pace on how often they want to be communicated with. Make sure you're adding value at each touch and delivering insights. But the best thing I can recommend here is go into your base of customers and ask them what they need from you. Do a listening tour. If you're a leader, executive, if you're an owner of your business, by all means, you should be over communicating and reaching out as much as you can. And all you're doing is listening, because this time you're not going to get again where your customers are so willing to go, this is what I need from you. I have time. I need help. Can you help me? And that's where you really can drive this loyalty. And they will forever remember how you treat them during this time and how responsive you are and what you enable your people to do as well. So for me, growth is a thinking game. I love saying that because I think people get a little intimidated by the activities they need to do in order to get themselves out of a growth stall, back to growth, navigating a pandemic and a financial crisis and everything else that's going on. And so it becomes overwhelming. So remember that slide I showed with, stabilize, back to work, and growth. Get yourself thinking in that way so you can give yourself some space to just focus on one of those three, put someone in charge, and then get those work groups going. Pull in some of your employees, get them engaged in this entire process with you, make them feel part of the solution, not that you're just, they don't know if and when you're going to call them and say, I've got to furlough you. That's the last thing you want to do, is that they never hear from you except when you reach out to them to say that, you can no longer work here for whatever the reason might be. So this is about taking the time to think, pausing and hitting reset and saying, what can I do different? So you have to start with a beginner's mind. What that means is I don't want you to forget everything you know. I want to give yourself permission for a little space, 10 or 15% of your mental capacity time of a day. Spend on, if I could do something different, if I could start an entirely new company, what would I do different than what I did the last time? Then how do you do that now? And so beginner's mind is just asking a lot of questions, listening and learning, pivoting your perspective on things. You will never survive this if you go through it's not the way we do it here. We tried it before, it failed. Our culture can't handle it. I don't agree with that. This is not about you. This is about your customers and how can you make sure you remain relevant. Then I would say you have to start with your employees. Start with your people first. Look, the path to really happy customers are your employees loving their job. So you want to make sure that it's employee first and customer centric. Your employees need to be empowered and enabled to do what's right for your customers. The competitive landscape has forever changed. Those you may have competed with 6 months ago or 12 months ago may not even be around anymore. You may have completely different competitors for people who have started businesses during this time because they saw a need, or they saw what you were doing and said, I want to put a modern twist on whatever it is you're doing, because they've now seen the opportunity. Remember those examples, jobs to be done, of those 10 companies that have really become unicorns from a startup perspective and grown to be so a critical part of all of our lives today. And so ultimately, your competition is not the people who you thought it was before we went into this. Lead with values, lead with trust, lead with transparency. Who are you as a brand? What do you stand for? As I mentioned at the beginning of this, the proceeds from this event are going to charity. Like, those are values. You participating in things. What are you doing for your community, for your people? Are you donating your employees' time? Are they delivering groceries for those who don't have transportation? Are they, offering to, do a Zoom call to read children's stories to kids? What are you doing from a values perspective? Are you donating PPE equipment? Are you doing fundraising? That is who you are as a brand. And those are the things, once again, that your customers will remember, and they want to not only buy from a brand who has values that align with theirs, but employees want to work for those brands too. Trust is about, are you telling your employees and your customers the truth about what's going on? You don't need to share everything. Like, boy, we only have, 90 days left of funds. I agree that there's a point in time where you need to communicate that. But if you've been communicating with them along the way over the last 5 months, they should know that that's where you're at. It shouldn't be some surprise all of a sudden that happens. And so trust is, how do you use clients' data and information? What are you doing during this time from an employee safety standpoint? But more importantly, kind of the transparency and authenticity of how you communicate that. As a leader, you are the one that has to set the tone for how the rest of the organization is going to behave. If you lead with values, if you lead with trust, if you lead with transparency, if you're authentic, they will feel much more, they will feel safer in doing the same thing. But you have to listen, and then you have to be able and willing to act. The next is, what you do today will impact tomorrow. I can't stress this enough. If you completely abandon your employees and you don't answer the phone and you don't return products and, you're not willing to help, trust me, they won't forget. And your employees are going to be like, wow, that's not the company I thought I was working for. Do I want to continue working for this company? So, the decisions you make as a leader right now, it may be really uncomfortable for you. But, the piece of advice I can give you on that is you've got to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it's just not going to get any easier. You signed up as a leader. This is what you wanted to do. It's why you're doing it. And so anything you can do to consume, like this event today, consume information so that you can start with that beginner's mind and pivot a little bit. But all the change absolutely starts with you. It has to start with you. As a leader, you are the one. You are the light that everyone's going to look to see what it is you're going to be doing as a business, how you're going to respond, what you're doing for your employees, your communities, your customers, how you behave. Look, there is no, playbook. There is no roadmap. There is no one answer to this. You're going to have to find your own way, because remember, the context for you is unique. And so start there. Start with you. So what will you do different? What will you do different because of what you heard here today throughout the course of this event? What will you do different? I hope you will just do one thing different, maybe two. Be great if it was a handful. I hope you have a page of notes of all the things that you hadn't thought of, or more importantly, that you flat out didn't agree with, because then I know you took the time to go, do I agree with that? This is what I think. And you took the time to think about it. That's a win. And so even if you choose not to do it, you put it through its own paces to make the right decisions for you, for your employees, for your company, for your families, for your communities. It's really up to you to make those changes. But at the end of the day, be bold. Be bold in the decisions that you make. Failure is not the end of the world unless you're trying to find a cure for this pandemic. So ultimately, as long as it's legal and it doesn't hurt anybody, be bold, right? Try something new. Do something that you may have never tried before, because you've got this opportunity where people are hungry for leadership. They're hungry for inspiration. They're hungry for something to get them inspired to keep going. So this is your opportunity to just be bold. So further inspiration for you, I have a podcast called What's Next. You can find it up on iTunes. You can find it on SoundCloud. You can find it on Spotify. So check it out. I interview really great people that I usually meet out on the road. But now I'm meeting them virtually. And actually, we've started to do some LinkedIn Lives as well with What's Next. One day I'll be like, I think I want to do a LinkedIn Live. So I haven't sort of gotten a little more formal on that one, but the podcast is every other Thursday. And so please keep an eye out for those guests. It's some great conversations. And then obviously my book, Growth IQ. It became a Wall Street Journal bestseller for many of you going out and purchasing and supporting it. So thank you. But it's now been published in 8 languages. So if you've got customers it's in Spanish, it's in Portuguese, simple Chinese, Polish, Vietnamese, Thai, Korean, and Russian. So those are the languages that it's in at this point. So with that, I just want to give you a thank you. Thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for joining us today on Leadership Goes Beyond. Thank you to Titu and the team for inviting me to participate. And again, thank you for supporting the charities that this event has been so kind. So I appreciate you, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.